Reassessing the separability links between law and morality. Introduction. H.L.A. Hart's book Concept of Law was a good read, especially considering his approach of the separability thesis. The separability thesis is saying that morality and law are ideally separate. In Hart's point of view, without the need of moral justification, legal systems are perfectly fine with being understood through the recognition of legal norms and social facts. Hart argues that a legal system's logic is not determined by its moral content alone, but instead more by its sources. With putting Hart in polar opposite to natural law theorists that attempt to argue law is naturally bound to morality, the following claim has been more like a pillar of legal positivism, with saying that Hart's separability thesis may provide a very convincing foundation to help understand the connection between law and morality. That does not mean that it is not without detractors. With many challenges of the thesis that many different philosophers have argued, they propose that law can't be separated from morality. The philosophers state that the law they believe in is that ethical issues in law are close to being related, saying that there are serious risks if the two become separated. The weaknesses this paper provides from Hart's thesis are by making light of crucial connections between both law and morality, with their negative relationship being the center of attention. Understanding Hart's separability thesis. Hart's separability thesis supports that moral concerns are not always linked to the existence of substance of law. Existence and substance of law is the foot of Hart's legal positivism. Morality not being required for legal systems to work was one of Hart's major arguments. While speaking about the natural law tradition, however, holds that morality and law are connected. Natural law theorists insist that since unjust laws are not laws, they don't really fulfill moral standards. But saying that, Hart protests that if an unjust law serves the needed requirements framed by the legal system, it may still be mandatory. Legal systems face the danger of turning into tools of oppression and being used to protect illegal actions is morality and the law are completely separated. The risks that come with morality, unacceptable laws, are not handled properly by Hart's separability thesis and argument. A perfect example for this is the apartheid laws in South Africa. They were still a part of the legal foundation at the time, while being immoral. Further developing this argument, Hart distinguishes between primary and secondary laws. Primary laws such as forbidding theft and examples of major laws that control behaviors, but secondary laws are more to make changes and enforce laws for primary laws. Members of a society may understand and accept laws unauthorized authorized despite their moral content. My goodness. This being thanks to the rule of recognition, an important secondary rule. Critique of Hart's separability thesis. With listing a lot of different strong points in Hart's view, there are a lot of weaknesses as well as there are strengths. And just like my paper, it is important to bring light on the weaknesses, especially in a paper like this on this topic. Hart's separability thesis drew a lot of criticism regardless of its conceptual elegance, especially to take into consideration the link between morality and law. One of those critics being Ronald Dworkin. Dworkin argued that law couldn't be understood fully without taking moral principles into account. In cases where the law is incomplete or vague, critics state that the legal decisions often depend on moral reasoning. Critics also disagree that separating the two is harmful in reality and imperfect since the law is such moral in numerous ways. Included in these criticisms are the following arguments. The inextricable role of moral judgment in legal interpretation. When explaining the law, judges and attorneys turn to moral reasoning. The effect of moral concern in situations when the law is unclear, partial, or broad is not sufficiently taken into consideration by Hart's approach. In these situations, judges are bound to give moral judgment, undermining the notion that the new law may be neutral or procedural. Moral values influence on legal systems. Moral values shape many different laws. For example, moral laws such as justice and fairness have a pretty big impact on laws that defend human rights. Moral factors affect how laws are written and formed, leading to the legal acknowledgement of equality, individual liberties, and the banning of harmful acts. The challenge of identifying valid laws without morality. Hart's rule of recognition, according to critics, may not be enough to explain how legal systems protect their rationality. How do we explain a legal system volume to impose authority and compliance on its people if it is morally neutral? For instance, how can legal systems gain rightfulness in cultures when people believe that the laws aren't fair or immoral? Possible replies to the criticism. Hart would oppose to the separability thesis is not rejected by that argument that judges have to make moral decisions while understanding the law. The law alone is not always morally dependent, no matter if judges may use moral reasoning in some certain situations. Hart would argue that reasoning doesn't fix the rightfulness of the law itself, but instead is used as a tool inside the legal system to settle any sort of complex arguments. Hart may argue that legal systems are flexible and can protect their traditional morality. In response to the question of whether immoral laws are lawful, Hart would probably argue that legal systems work appropriately to protocols they are used to and standards, and that the existence of the law being unfair doesn't decide the authority as a whole of the system. With that, Hart could also argue previously made laws were enforced could someday be put into, or could be changed to be made to reflect new moral understanding, since the rule of acknowledgement allows legal systems to change with time, just like social norms do. Conclusion. In conclusion, an important key factor in legal positivism and Hart's separability thesis, which holds the morality and the law can and need to be kept separated. My gosh. The objection stood against this idea, but drew attention to its flaws and the possible risks. The links between law and morality are shown by how important moral reasonings are when interpreting the law, the influence of moral values on legal systems, the challenges of creating laws that are lawful without morality, and the potential of moral harm and oppression. Hart's thesis provides an effective system for understanding the basic principles of law. But considering these criticisms, it needs to be looked at and needs to be more developed. Although it may look like a good idea in general, it might be challenging to keep up the difference between morality and the law in real life without possibly allowing another generation of cruel and damaging legal systems. With that, to make sure the legal systems continue to keep up with the basic moral principles and supports the best interests of society, a deeper awareness of the connection between morality and the law might be needed.